हरेर् अवतारानुचरितम् अस्य अनुवर्तिनां च सत्कथा ईशानुकथाः प्रोक्ताः इत्यर्थः। So Ishanukatha refers to the activities of the incarnations of Lord Hari, as well as the activities of persons who follow Lord Hari. तथावेव हरेर् अवतारानुचरितम् अस्य अनुवर्तिनां च कथाः ईशानकथा प्रोक्ता इति अर्थः. And this happens at the time of sthiti, maintenance. अस्य अनुवर्तिनाम् अवतार परिकर रूपाणां भक्तानाम् अवतारानुचरितम् इष्यकथा. The uh, the activities of his great devotees refer to the activities of the associates of those incarnations. तासां श्रवणीय कीर्तनीयत्वादिभ्यः स्थितौ एव केषांचित् साधकभक्तानां श्रवणकीर्तनादीनि भक्त्यङ्गानि उक्तानि. At the time of sthiti, at the time of maintenance, some of the sadhaka bhaktas, for them, these are the subject matters for their Shravanam, Kirtanam, and so on. It is a part of their engagement in bhakti. During the course of the existence of the cosmic manifestation, the chronology of history is created, recording the activities of the living entities. People in general have a tendency to learn the history and narrations of different men and times, but due to a lack of knowledge in the science of Godhead, they are not apt to study the history of the incarnations of the personality of Godhead. It should always be remembered that the material creation is created for the salvation of the conditioned souls. The merciful Lord, out of his causeless mercy, descends to various planets in the material world and acts for the salvation of the conditioned souls. That makes the history and narrations worth reading. Srimad Bhagavatam offers such transcendental topics of the Lord in relationship with great devotees. Therefore, the topics of the devotees and the Lord are to be given respectful oral reception. 6. Nirodhosyanushyayanam atmana sahashaktibhihi muktirhitwanyatha rupam swarupena vyavasthiti. The merging of the living entity along with this conditional living tendency with the mystic lying down of the Mahavishnu is called the winding up of the cosmic manifestation. Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after he gives up the changeable gross and subtle material bodies. अस्य आत्मनः जीवस्य हरेर्योगनिद्राम् अनुपश्चात् शक्तिभिश्च उपाधिभिः सह शयनं लयः निरोधः. So the merging of the Jivatma into Lord Hari when he enters into, after he enters into Yoganidra. And we are talking of the merging of the living entity along with his energies, Shaktibhi, which refers to his upadhis, his designations, material designations, which refers to his conditional living tendencies. That is known as Nirodha, the winding up of the cosmic manifestation. Anyatha rupam avidyaya adhyastam कृतत्वादिहित्वा स्वरूपेण ब्रह्मत्तया व्यवस्थितिर्मुक्तिः. To give up the obsession of being the sole responsible agent as a doer, which has been superimposed by avidya, and to be situated in one's original nature as Brahman, spirit, is liberation. स्थित्यनन्तरं च आत्मनः जीवस्य शक्तिभिः स्वरूपाधिभिः सह अस्य हरेरनुशयनं हरिशयन अनुगतत्वेन शयनं निरोधयत्यर्थः. To merge into the Lord along with Lord Hari, along with him. So when he is sleeping, the Jivatmas are also made to sleep. This is Nirodha. Tatra Hare Shayanam, Prapancham Prati Drishti Nimilanam. And the meaning of Lord Hari sleeping is that his closing his eyes towards material existence. Jivanam Shayanam Tatra Laya iti. And the sleeping of the Jivas refers to them being merged into him. Tatraiva Nirodhe Anyatha Rupam Avidyadhyastam Agyatvadikam Hitva Swarupena Vyavasthitir Muktirati. At that time, the living entity gives up his ignorance and so on, which are superimposed by avidya, ignorance, and is situated in his swarupa. Now, this status is known as mukti. Swarupena vyavasthitir nama, swarupa sakshatkara uchyate. To be situated in one's swarupa refers to experiencing one's own swarupa, one's own nature. Tadavasthanamatrasya samsaradashayamapi sthitva. Because he's always situated in his constitutional position as a soul, even when he's in material existence. Yatharupatwasya cha tad jnanamatra arthatvena tad hanau tad jnana paryavasana. And his having the other form that is actually caused by ignorance. Swarupam chatra mukhyam paramatma lakshanameva. Rashmi parvanunam suryeva. Saiva hi jivanam paramaha amshi swarupaha. Ythoktam brahmanam prati srimata garbhodashayina. The jivatmas are related to the Supreme Lord the way atoms of sun rays are related to the sun. And then he refers to 3.9.33. Anyatha rupam mayikam sthula sukshma rupa dvayam hitva स्वरूपेण शुद्ध जीव स्वरूपेण केशांचित भगवत पार्षद रूपेण च व्यवस्थित मुक्तिरति. The other form, anyatha rupam, that is being given up at the time of liberation, that is a Maic form. It is a form produced by Maya. It refers to the gross and subtle forms. So abandoning that, when the living entity is situated as a pure jiva, and for some of them, in the form of an associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such a situation is known as liberation. So in this way, there are 9 topics beginning with creation, which refer to the jiva, the living entity. As we have discussed several times, there are 2 types of living entities. Most of them are ever liberated or nityamuktas, while some of them are ever conditioned. The ever conditioned souls are apt to develop a mentality of lording it over the material nature. And therefore, the material cosmic creation is manifested to give the ever conditioned souls 2 kinds of facilities. One facility is that the conditioned soul can act according to his tendency to lording it over the cosmic manifestation. And the other facility gives the conditioned soul a chance to come back to Godhead. So after the winding up of the cosmic manifestation, most of the conditioned souls merge into the existence of the Mahavishnu personality of Godhead lying in his mystic slumber to be created again in the next creation. But some of the conditioned souls who follow the transcendental sound in the form of Vedic literatures and are thus able to go back to Godhead attain their original spiritual bodies after quitting the conditional, gross, and subtle material bodies. The material conditional bodies develop out of the living entity's forgetfulness of their relationship with Godhead, and during the course of the cosmic manifestation, the conditioned souls are given a chance to revive their original status of life with the help of the revealed scriptures, so mercifully compiled by the Lord in his different incarnations. Reading or hearing such transcendental literatures helps one become liberated even in the conditional state of material existence. All the Vedic literatures aim at devotional service to the personality of Godhead, and as soon as one is fixed upon this point, he at once becomes liberated from conditional life. The material gross and subtle forms are simply due to the conditioned soul's ignorance, and as soon as he is fixed in the devotional service of the Lord, he becomes eligible to be freed from the conditioned state. This devotional service is transcendental attraction for the Supreme on account of his being the source of all pleasing humors. Brahmasandarbha, this is being referred to by Jiva Goswami. Taittiriya Upanishad 2.7.1, a very famous statement. Raso vai saha is talking about the Supreme Brahman. The Supreme Brahman is Rasa himself. Rasam Shevayam Labdhva Anandi Bhavati. And when the living entity attains this rasa, this personification of rasa, then he becomes happy. Everyone is after some pleasure of humor for enjoyment, but does not know the supreme source of all attraction. So vai saha rasam hevayam labdhvanandi bhavati. My teacher Sri Gopi Prandan Prabhu, he once told me that the entire Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is a very detailed commentary on this um, statement. Raso vai saha rasam hevayam labdhvanandi bhavati. The Vedic hymns inform everyone about the supreme source of all pleasure. The unlimited fountainhead of all pleasure is the personality of Godhead. And one who is fortunate enough to get this information through transcendental literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam becomes permanently liberated to occupy his proper place in the kingdom of God. Text 7. Abhasascha nirodhascha yatostyadhyavasiyate sa ashriyah param brahma paramatmeti shabdyate. The Supreme Soul, who is celebrated as the Supreme Being or the Supreme Soul, the Supreme One, who is celebrated as the Supreme Being or the Supreme Soul, is the supreme source of the cosmic manifestation as well as its reservoir and winding up. Thus, he is the supreme fountainhead, the absolute truth. आभासः सृष्टिः निरोधः लयः च यतः भवति अध्यवसीयते प्रकाशते च स परं ब्रह्मेति परमात्मेति प्रसिद्ध आश्रय कथ्यते. Abhasa refers to creation or the manifestation of the cosmos. Nirodha refers to laya, it's winding up. By whom all of this is understood and revealed, that entity is known as Param Brahma or Paramatma. He is the very famous Ashraya. आभासः सृष्टिः निरोधः लयश्च यतो भवति अध्यवसीयते प्रकाशते च उपलभ्यते. जीवानां ज्ञानेन्द्रियेषु स ब्रह्मेति परमात्मा इति प्रसिद्धाश्रये कथ्यते. So, the one because of whom all of this is perceived is the Supreme Brahman. He is the Supreme Soul. He is the famous Ashraya, shelter. इति शब्द प्रकारार्थः तेन भगवान् इति च. The word iti, Paramatma, iti shabdiyate, is referred to as Paramatma. It should be understood to refer to Bhagavan also. Asya viruddha agrividhya. तथा हि अत्र दशार्थः प्रथमस्कन्धानुक्रमेण निरूप्यन्ते यथा. These 10 topics, they are uh, described from the first canto onwards. सामान्यतो लक्षितस्य अपि आश्रयत्वं श्रीकृष्णे एव तु वैशिष्ट्यं तदर्थमेव हि अखंड श्री भागवत प्रकाशः. Even though the supreme absolute truth is characterized in a very general sense, he is specifically characterized as Sri Krishna. It is for this purpose itself the complete Srimad Bhagavatam has been manifested. तत्र प्रथमस्कन्धे श्री शौनकसूतयोः प्रश्नोत्तरे त्वेनैव प्रतिपादिते तत् अनुगतौ एव प्रथमद्वितीयाध्यायौ तृतीयाध्यायस्तु सुत एव पुनर्विशेषतः तत् प्रस्तावाय चतुर्थ आदि अध्याय तत्र तदेकपरयोः श्रीशुकपरीक्षितो संवादघटना. In the first canto, this point that Sri Krishna is the ultimate shelter comes out in the questions and answers between Sri Shaunaka and Suta Goswami. Following that, and in line with that, we see in the first and second chapters, and then later in the third chapter, it becomes even more clear. And as an introduction to later chapters, such as the fourth chapter, then we have everything culminating in the conversation between Sri Shuka and Parikshit, who both are fixed in Sri Krishna. When he says Sri Krishna here, he's talking of Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. अतः द्वितीयस्कन्धस्य सामान्य भगवत्तत्त्वं प्रशंसन् अपि तत्रैव तात्पर्यं वहति. Therefore, in the second canto, even though Sukadeva Goswami glorifies Bhagavan in general, Vishnu Tattva in general, the second canto carries the import of Sri Krishna being the actual shelter. Yatra Brahmanaha Chatushloki Bhakti Shri Bhagavatascha Tatparyam Cha Tatraiva Darshitam. And that purport is revealed in Brahma's presentation of Chatushloki. So it is revealed by Brahma and Sri Bhagavan, who is the speaker of Chatushloki. Brahma Kalpakatharambhasya Tadartha Eva. And the beginning of the discussion on Brahmakalpa is also for the same point. Tritiye Padmakalpa Kathacha. And the third canto also, the same point is brought out while discussing Padmakalpa. Tatasya Purva Pararthasya Adyanta Varnane Madhyamanam Api Kalpanam Tadanusarena Jnane Sati Dashama Ekadashayoh Prastava Vyayas Takataya Samyag Avagama. एवमेव गते स्वयंभुव चाक्षुषमनन्तरेऽपि तृतीये चतुर्थ पंचम षष्ठ सप्तमे निरूपिते अष्टमे प्राचीनविश्वस्य नवमस्तु तत्प्रादुर्भाव आस्पद केवल वैवस्वता अन्वय एव द्वादश खलु समाधि मुद्राणं तत्पूषिकाय तस्मात् स्वर्गादीनां मध्ये क्वचित् एकद्वारा क्वचित् अनेकद्वारा यः आश्रय निरूप्यते स तु तस्मादविष्ठानगतद्वारा सर्वतोत्कृष्टि श्री कृष्ण रूप निरूप्यते. Okay, I'll just summarize what he has said here. Uh, there are between the third canto and the 10th canto, you find discussions of activities that took place in various manvantaras. But all of this nourished the basic fact that Sri Krishna is the uh, original, exalted form of the shelter. That is specifically clear in 10th canto and 11th canto. सर्गादीनां नवानां लक्षणेनैव तद्विषयीभूतान् सर्वान् लक्षयित्वा एकस्य आश्रयस्य लक्षणेन परमेश्वरं लक्षयति. So he has presented that definitions of the first 9 topics. And then he defines the one topic of Ashraya in terms of the Supreme Lord. Abhasah sargah chikarat sthiti poshanadeyah. Here, abhasah cha. Cha means and, cha also means etc. So, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, abhasascha means all the topics from sarga up to the first 8 items. Nirodhascheti cha shabdan muktischa. And nirodha cha, nirodha and so on. Cha again means etc. or and so on. That refers to topic number, no, nirodha must be 8, mukti must be 9, correct. So then abhasaha cha means topics 1 to 7. Nirodha cha is topics 8 and 9. यत एव अधिवसीयते निश्चयते स आश्रयो भगवान् नारायण एव तस्मादेव सृष्टि आदि दर्शनात्. So that one, because of whom these first 9 events or these 9 events take place. Each topic corresponds to a particular event. That is Bhagavan Narayana. Because we see creation and so on happening because of him. Tasyaiva upasaka bhedena sankhyantaramaha. Corresponding to the differences amongst his meditators, he has different names. He is sometimes called Param Brahma, sometimes he is called Paramatma. Synonyms for the supreme source of all energies are given in the very beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmadhyasya Yataha, and in the second chapter, Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yajnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. Here the synonyms are Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. The word iti used in this verse under discussion completes the synonyms and thus indicates Bhagavan. This will be further explained in later verses, but the word Bhagavan ultimately means Lord Krishna because the Srimad Bhagavatam has already accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Krishna. Krishna Su Bhagavan Swayam, the original source of all energies or the Sambham Bonam, is the absolute truth, which is called Parabrahman, etc. And Bhagavan is the last word of the absolute truth. But even with the synonyms for Bhagavan, such as Narayana, Vishnu, and Purusha, the last word is Krishna, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Aham sarvasya prabho, mattas sarvam pravartate, etc. Besides that, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the representation of Lord Krishna as a sound incarnation of the Lord. Krishne svadhamopagade dharmagyanadibhi saha kalau nashtad drishamesh puranarko dhunoditaha. Thus, by general conclusion, Lord Krishna is the ultimate source of all energies, and the word Krishna means that. And to explain Krishna or the signs of Krishna, the Srimad Bhagavatam has been prepared. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this truth is indicated in the questions and answers by Suta Goswami, and great sages like Shaunaka. And in the first and second chapters of the canto, this is explained. In the third chapter, the subject is more explicit, and in the fourth chapter, even more explicit. In the second canto, the absolute truth as the personality of God is further emphasized, and the indication is the Supreme Lord Krishna. The summary of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 verses, as we have already discussed, is succinct. This Supreme Personality of Godhead in the ultimate issue is confirmed by Brahma in his Brahma Samhita as Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. So it is concluded in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The complete subject matter is elaborately explained in the 10th and 11th cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the matter of the Manvantaras or reigns of the Manus, such as the Swayambhu Manvantara and Chakshusha Manvantara, as they are discussed in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna is indicated. Actually, in Krishna Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami takes us through canto by canto and he points out every canto has some indication that ultimately the shelter is Krishna. In the 8th canto, in reference to the Vaivasvatama mantra, the same subject is explained indirectly, and in the 9th canto, the same purport is there. In the 12th canto, the same is further explained specifically regarding the different incarnations of the Lord. Thus, it is concluded by studying the complete Srimad Bhagavatam that Lord Sri Krishna is the ultimate summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energy. And according to the grades of worshippers, the indications of the nomenclature may be differently explained as Narayana, Brahman, Paramatma, etc. Narayana is also a name of Krishna. In 2.10.1, Nirodha, going back home back to Godhead. But in 6 shloka is translated as winding up of cosmic manifestation. Nirodha can mean to end one's material existence, but Nirodha can also mean to end one's experience of one's temporary ending of material existence. That means every time the living entity is put to sleep, he is not able to experience the varieties of cosmic manifestation. So that can also be considered to be a form of cessation, stoppage. Nirodha means to stop. So it stops the Jivatma's experience of the cosmic manifestation for some time. And it is periodical, but it is eternal. So therefore, it is not inappropriate to explain it in terms of that also. But ultimately, when you consider Nirodha along with Mukti, then that refers to making spiritual progress towards liberation. Text 8. Yodhyatmikoyam purusha sosavevaधिदैविकः यस्तत्रो भयविच्छेद purusho hyadhibhautikah. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmika person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adhidaivi. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adhibhautik person. आश्रयस्वरूपम् अपरोक्षानुभवेन स्पष्टं दर्शयितुम् अध्यात्मादिविभागमाह. To clarify the nature of the ashraya through direct experience, he then talks about Adhyatma, Adidaiva, and Adhibhuta. Yoyam Adhyatmika Purushaha Chakshuradi Karana Abhimani Drashta Jiva. The Adhyatmika Purusha, the Adhyatmika person, refers to the spiritual person. The spiritual person is the seer, he is the Jiva, and he is the one who is identifying with the various senses of his body. Saiva Adhidaivikaha Chakshuradi Adhisthata Suryadihi. So that person is the Adhisthata or presiding deity of the eyes and so on, which refers to the deity of the sun and so on. तस्मिन्नेव उभयद्विरूपो विच्छेद यस्मात् स अधिभौतिकः चक्षुर्गोलकाद्युपलक्षितदृश्यः देहः पुरुष इति पुरुषस्य जीवस्य उपाधिः. And then you have the person who is seen with one's eyes. That is the material designation of the jiva, and that is the adhivautika person. Samayesha Purushvanna Rasamaya Ityadi Shruti. The Shruti, Taittiriya Upanishad, talks about this person as being made up of food, liquids, and so on. So the idea is that there is a pure living entity, then there is the pure living entity with a subtle body and gross body as the controlled, and then you have the demigods who are also pure living entities and who also have these bodies, but they are the controllers. And on top of it, we have the gross body. The gross body is also considered to be a person in a metaphorical sense. अथ विष्टभ्याहम् इदं कृत्स्नम् एकांशेन स्थितो जगत् इत्युक्तेः अतिदेहम् एव अन्तर्यामिरूपेण स्थितं तदेव आश्रयरूपम् अध्यात्मादिभ्यः विभागेन स्पष्टं दर्शयितुम् आह द्वाभ्याम्. The Supreme Lord himself is situated in this world with one fragment of himself in the form of Antaryami, the inner ruler, in every body. So that form of the Ashraya, Shukadev Goswami wants to point out with clarity. So therefore, he distinguishes between Adhyatma and so on. Yo Adhyatmikaha ayam iti sarvam vinayaditva. Okay. योऽयम् आध्यात्मिकः पुरुषः यद्दिदम् अध्यात्मकं चक्षुरादिकरणम् इत्यर्थः स एव अधिदैविकः चक्षुराद्यधिष्ठाता सूर्यादिन्द्रिय तदधिष्ठात्रोरुभयोरेव सूर्याद्यंशत्वेन एकरूपात् इत्यर्थः. तत्र तत्त्वेषु मध्ये उभय आध्यात्म अधिदैवरूपविच्छेदः विभागो यस्मिन् सः. There's a distinction between the Adhyatmika person and the Adhidaivika person. Adi Bhautika Chakshu Golaka Dupalakshita Drishya Deha. And then you have the body. I'll read the purport, then I will also go back to what I'll do is I'll read a portion from Tattva Sandarbha where this topic is further described. The supreme controlling summum bonum is the personality of Godhead in his plenary portion of Paramatma or the Super Soul manifestation. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.42 it is said, Athava Bahunaitena Kim Gyatena Tavarjuna Vishtabhyahamitam Kritsnam Ekamshena Sthito Jagat. All the controlling deities like Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva are different manifestations of the Paramatma feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, who exhibits himself in such manners by entering into each and every universe generated from him. But still, apparently, there are divisions of the controller and controller. For example, in the food controlling department, the controller of food is a person made of the same ingredients as the person who is controlled. Similarly, each and every individual in the material world is controlled by the higher demigods. For example, we have our senses, but the senses are controlled by superior controlling deities. We cannot see without light, and the supreme controller of light is the sun. The sun god is a sun planet, and we, the individual human beings or any other being on this earth, are all controlled by the sun god as far as our eyes are concerned. Similarly, all the senses we have are controlled by the superior demigods, who are also as much living entities as we are, but one is empowered while the other is controlled. The controlled living entity is called the Adhyatmic person, and the controller is called the Adhidaivic person. All these positions in the material world are due to different fruitive activities. Any individual living being can become a sun god or even Brahma or any other god in the upper planetary system by a higher grade of pious work. And similarly, one becomes controlled by the higher demigods by lower grades of fruitive activities. So every individual living entity is subject to the supreme control of the Paramatma, who puts everyone in different positions of the controller and controlled. That which distinguishes the controller and the control, that is the material body, is called the Adhibhautik Purusha. See, a gross body which is dependent on food and liquid is found in the controlled conditioned souls. The controlling conditioned souls do not have this. That is why Prabhupada is saying that which distinguishes the controller and control, that is the material body, is the Adhibhautik Purusha. The body is sometimes called Purusha, as confirmed in the Vedas in the following hymn: Savayesho Purushaha Anna Rasamaya. This body is called the Anna Rasa embodiment. This body depends on food. The living entity which is embodied does not eat anything, however, because the owner is spirit in essence. The material body requires replacement of matter because of the wearing and tearing of the mechanical body. Therefore, the distinction between the individual living entity and controlling planetary deities is in the Anna Rasamaya body. So, in other words, these presiding deities, these demigods, they don't have gross bodies which require to be maintained through food. This is a fact actually. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita also, Sanatana Goswami explains that the demigods, they eat for entertainment. They don't eat for their sustenance. They don't have that kind of a body. The sun may have a gigantic body and the man may have a smaller body, but all these visible bodies are made of matter. Nonetheless, the sun god and the individual person who are related as the controller and the controlled are equivalent spiritual parts and parcels of the Supreme Being. And it is the Supreme Being who places different parts and parcels in different positions. In other words, the demigods, they have, primarily they have subtle bodies, but they do have um, something like a gross body. The five gross elements are there, but they are not dependent for food and so on. But ultimately, they are also jivatmas only. The whole idea is they are sheltered. The controlled conditioned souls are sheltered. The controlling conditioned souls are also sheltered. And the shelter is different from both of them. And thus the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. Okay, I'll read this also. Then I'll go into Tattva Sandarbha. I thought there's some questions about it. What do you mean by eating for entertainment? They don't require a body. They don't require a body. They don't require a gross body. This is just for their pleasure. Mohan Radhapati Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, this question is from yesterday's sloka in 4th verse, where this karma vasana term was coming. So I wanted to understand what is this karma vasana, and does engaging in spiritual activities also give us some spiritual vasana or something?
Engaging in spiritual activity certainly gives rise to spiritual desires, but that is all if one is interested in engaging in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord, then one develops pure vasanas. That is spiritual. But if one is interested in engaging in tinged or contaminated devotional service, then there is a mixture of different types of vasanas.
So when I do any work, vasana means like I will have a taste for doing it in the future, more taste.
When we engage in pious activities, then a little bit of taste for it is registered. Similarly, when we engage in sinful activities, a little bit of taste for it is registered. And the more one engages in these material pious activities or material impious activities, the more and more these tastes are registered. So therefore, Vasana is very much influential in our um, functioning, in the way we do things. These are all loaded into the subconsciousness of each conditioned soul.
So, Prabhu, when in third chapter, when Arjuna is asking that why am I impelled to act against my desire, and Krishna answers that lust. So these lust and vasana, they are like they are the same thing.
It's the same thing. We saw that in Baladevi Devotion's commentary. He explained it like that also.
Okay, bro. Thank you, bro.
Okay, another question. Sadharma or duty performed for going back to Godhead and thus becoming a unalloyed devotee is the only pious activity. All others may pretend to be pious, but actually they are not. What does all others mean here? All others means all other activities outside of Bhagavata Dharma. There's so many pious activities in the karma system. That is what they are referred to here. 1 minute. Let me anyway open. There is a reason why Shukadeva Goswami is bringing up the topic of bringing up these 10 topics and then also discussing this Adhyatma, Adhidaiva, Adhibhokta, Adhibhutika. I'll read the translations. This is text 56 onwards. Tattva. Thus, the essential identity of the jivas who are constituted as described above as purely spiritual. The tattva, the absolute truth, has been described as being non-different from the jivas because it shares with them the same spiritual constitution and is the whole of which they are integral parts. This is the way of describing the tattva in terms of vyashti, the individual beings. This tattva is called the shelter ashraya. This tattva, called the shelter ashraya, can also be defined in another way in terms of samashti, the totality of existence. This involves using the concepts such as primary creation that define a world as a major Purana, as in the following two verses. The themes of this Bhagavatam are primary creation, Sarga, secondary creation, Visarga, maintenance by the Supreme Lord, Sthana, his special mercy, Poshana, the Jiva's desires, Uti, reigns of Manus, Manvantara, narrations of the Lord's pastimes, Ishanukatha, annihilation, Nirodha, liberation, Mukti, and the ultimate shelter, Ashraya. To delimit the meaning of the 10th topic, great sages describe the qualities of the other 9 in this work. They do this both by direct statement and by implication. The compound Manvantareshanu Kathaha means reigns of Manus and narrations about the Supreme Lord. The basic idea of these verses is this. In this work, 10 topics are defined, beginning with Sarga. The first 9 are defined through descriptions of their essential natures as a means of purifying or clearing the way for correct understanding of the 10th, namely the Ashraya. One might complain, but I do not find that done in this work. The answer is that they, the speakers in the Bhagavatam, describe these topics not only literally in direct descriptions given in their prayers and elsewhere, but also by implication in the unspoken purport of various narrations. The commentary. The personality of God mercifully reveals himself in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. Because our intelligence has been darkened by ignorance for many lifetimes, we need special help to find our way out of bewilderment. Therefore, the Bhagavatam teaches these two gradual ways of understanding the Supreme Person: contemplation of our own spiritual nature and study of the universal creation. The Jiva can find in his own self a spiritual microcosm, a small reflected image of God's perfection. And in the universal creation, he can find a macrocosm in which he can discern the Lord's divine potencies and mercy. Creating the material world is hardly the most wonderful thing the Supreme Lord does, any more than building prisons is the prime way a government satisfies the law abiding citizens. In the spiritual world, the Lord enjoys with his pure devotees countless varieties of loving reciprocation, compared with which the affairs of the material creation are mean and unpleasant. Only to us, the prisoners of this world, does God's having created it seem more important than everything else He does. Yet, even though the conditioned souls have a childlike fascination with their own limited world, the Lord kindly reveals Himself in the Puranas through accounts of the history of this universe. For people in the modes of ignorance, passion, and mixed goodness, various Puranas give glimpses of the supreme power and the wonders of creation, sometimes seen from unusual angles. And for the most fortunate persons, the Bhagavata Purana vividly reveals the full glory of the Supreme. Every topic presented in Srimad Bhagavatam is systematically directed toward uncovering the reader's understanding of the ultimate foundation of all being. Nothing in Srimad Bhagavatam is superfluous, aimless, or distracting from its final purpose. 57. Therefore, to elucidate the 10th topic, 7 verses are spoken to define all 10. The first verse reads thus: the generation of the physical elements, of the subtle objects of perception, of the senses, and of consciousness is called Sarga, the primary creation. It results from the Supreme Lord's disturbing the equilibrium of the modes of nature. The secondary creation effected by Lord Brahma is called Visarga. The bhutas are the elements such as ether, the matras are sound, and so on, the subtle objects of perception. The word dhi, consciousness, here indicates both the Mahatattva and the false ego. Also mentioned here are the senses. The generation of the bhutas and so on, which is done by Brahman, the Supreme Lord, through an imbalance causing transformation of the modes, is called sarga. And the creation of the moving and non-moving creatures is called visarga. This secondary creation is called Paurusha because it is done by Brahma, the creator Purusha, who is related to the universal body. Continuing the 7 verses, the word maintenance, sthiti, means the victory of Lord Vaikuntha, and sustenance, Poshana, is a special favor. The reigns of Manus, Manvantara, indicates the principles of transcendental religion, and creative urges, Uti, refers to intentions to engage in material activities. Topics about the Lord Ishana Katha are the pastimes of the Supreme Lord's incarnations and faithful devotees, pastimes that serve as the topics for various narrations. Here, maintenance, sthiti or sthana, refers to the victory of the Supreme Lord Vaikuntha. His super excellence in maintaining the prescribed status of each of his creatures. Among all thus maintained, his devotees receive his special favor or sustenance, poshana. The reigns of Manus indicates the histories of the Manus and other saintly persons who live during the various Manvantaras and are specially favored by the Lord. These histories constitute the principles of transcendental religion because these histories offer the dharma of meditation on the Supreme Lord. Within the same context of sthiti, maintenance, creative urges refers to desires to perform various kinds of fruitive work. Also included within sthiti are historical accounts of the deeds of Lord Hari's incarnations and followers. These accounts are called Ishan Katha. The lying down of the soul along with his own energies after the Lord lies down is called the winding up of the cosmic manifestation, Nirodha. The word liberation, Mukti, refers to the soul's giving up all other identification to become situated in its true identity. After the time of maintenance comes the annihilation, the lying down of the soul, the jiva, along with his own energies, upadhis, following Lord Hari. In other words, after Lord Hari lies down, specifically, Lord Hari's lying down means his closing his eyes to the material creation, and the jiva's lying down refers to his entering into the Lord. Within the topic of annihilation, the jiva's giving up his other forms, the ignorance and so on, imposed on him by the power of illusion, and his being established in his true identity is called liberation. This Anucheda presents 4 verses, Bhagavatam 2.10.3 to 6, in which Shukadeva Goswami defines the first 9 topics of the Bhagavatam. Other Puranas give attention to these same topics, but in Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Shukadeva carefully evolves all secondary supporting discussions towards understanding the 10th topic, the personality of Godhead. Lord Vishnu begins the process of universal creation by glancing upon his external energy. The glands of the Lord, which bears time, the sleeping jivas, and the jivas' individual karmic dispositions, impels Maya to evolve from herself the elements of matter from subtle to gross. This process of unfolding begins with the Mahatattva, the primeval mixture of the three material modes, and ends with fire, water, and earth. Included among these evolved elements are the sensory faculties and the basic objects of perception, tanmatras, corresponding to each sense. The sense of hearing, for example, has a subtle existence of its own apart from the inert physical apparatus of the ear, and the subtle object known as shabda, sound, is something distinct from the agitations of molecules in the air and other media that are measured physically as specific sounds. Various presiding deities assume responsibility for managing each of the created elements, but these demigods cannot effectively coordinate anything until Lord Vishnu personally enters each element to provide direction. The Lord also expands himself separately into each of the millions of egg-like universes as a Samashti Super Soul, Garbhodakashai Vishnu. In this way, the primary creation is presided over by the Supreme Lord directly, with Maya and the demigods acting in subordinate roles. The Lord delegates the later phase of creation to Brahma, the first jiva in the universe. Brahma is born from the lotus stem growing from Garbhodakashai Vishnu's navel, and this lotus stem is also the location of the Virat Purusha or universal form, which contains the prototype forms of all planets and all species of life. Brahma is a Jiva soul presuming ownership of the Virat body, and Garbhodakshai Vishnu is a super soul of that universal body. Thus, Brahma owes to Lord Vishnu not only his birth, but also his recollection of the knowledge required for engineering the universe. The Supreme Lord, having arranged the creation of the universe, personally directs its maintenance as long as the universe exists. Lord Vishnu is always victorious, always self evidently the supreme controller, because he supports the entire creation effortlessly without lifting a finger or suffering the anxiety of management. He maintains everything through the agency of the demigods and sages, his faithful servant, and he personally involves himself in the material world exclusively for his devotees, whom he repeatedly favors by appearing in his various incarnations. The mission of Lord Vishnu's avatars is described in the Bhagavad Gita 4.8. Paritranaya sadhuna, vinashaya cha dushkrita, dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. Commenting on this verse is Divine Grace A.Z. Bhakti-vaibhava Swami Prabhupada writes, as far as the atheistic are concerned, it is not necessary for the Supreme Lord to appear as he is to destroy them, as he did with the demons Ravana and Kamsa. The Lord has many agents who are quite competent to vanquish demons, but the Lord especially descends to appease his unalloyed devotees who are always harassed by the demoniac. Dharma Samsthapana, the periodic re-education of human civilization in spiritual principles, is also effected by the Supreme Lord with the help of his servants, in particular the Manus. Other demigods and sages living in the material world usually cannot have the Supreme Lord's personal association. Even Brahma cannot meet the Lord whenever he would like. When the demigods need to request the Lord's descent to protect them, Brahma must sit on the far shore of the ocean of milk and appeal to the unseen Lord in silent meditation. But since the Manus perform special service for the Lord by teaching the standards of religious life to human beings, Lord Vishnu is pleased to incarnate and personally reciprocate with each Manu in turn during their individual reigns, 14 in every day of Brahma. Thus, the Supreme Lord helps each Manu establish Sadharma, religious principles. The real purpose of the material creation is to give the Jivas an opportunity to try to fulfill their desires to control and enjoy. The creation of this world satisfies none of the Lord's own desires other than his desire to reform his rebellious dependents. Every material manifestation reflects the specific desires of some living entities. Vaishnavacharyas in their commentaries to Srimad Bhagavatam explain that no material body is produced until some conditioned soul wants to possess it. Even the subtle aggregates of the material elements are not created by Maya until particular demigods are each willing to accept one of them as its own body. As already mentioned, the remnants of past desires accompany each jiva within the glands of Mahavishnu into a new creation. Those same desires carry the jiva through any number of bodies, demigod, human, animal, and plant, in the regions of heaven, earth, and hell. This repeated birth and death, samsara, continues for each soul until he finally takes shelter of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, thus giving up material desires and rediscovering his eternal spiritual desires. Although the personality of Goddess avatars coincidentally assist in the work of universal maintenance, in reality, the Supreme Lord, unlike the conditioned residents of this world, is not obliged to work. All his activities are free play, lila, and whatever the Lord does in the course of his appearances, with or without a discernible purpose, is of interest for talks among Vaishnavas. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of narrations about many of the Lord's avatars, and the pastimes of the source of all avatars, Sri Krishna, occupy the entire 10th canto, nearly one third of the Bhagavatam's text. Every time the Supreme Lord appears in this world, he does so in response to the desires of his devotees. No description of the Lord's Leelas is complete, therefore, without descriptions of the character and activities of his devotees. Complementary to the topic of universal creation is that of the process in reverse, universal destruction. Nirodha, in its primary sense, is the annihilation that occurs at the end of the universe when even Brahma dies and all the remaining jivas enter the body of Mahavishnu for a prolonged period of dormancy. Srimad Bhagavatam's 12th canto also describes three other types of annihilation: the partial destruction of the universe at the end of each day of Brahma, the ongoing decay of everything material, and the final annihilation, the soul's liberation from the cycle of birth and death. In Shukadeva Goswami's list of Bhagavatam topics, liberation is a separate subject, but it is not the final and most important. Much more important than liberation, in Shukadeva's view, is devotion to the foundation of all being. Impersonalists earn an inferior kind of liberation by their painful disciplines aimed at artificially merging into the effulgent light from the Supreme Person's body. But as defined here, the true meaning of liberation is to give up all false material ideas of self and revive one's original Vaishnava identity. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the exemplar of perfect bhakti, prayed, Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye, amajanmani janmani ishvare bhavatat bhakti rahituki tvayi. O Lord of the universe, I do not desire material wealth, materialistic followers, a beautiful wife, or fruitive activities described in flowery language. All I want, life after life, is unmotivated devotional service to you, Shastaka 4. In other words, Lord Chaitanya says, I do not want anything material, nor do I care if I am reborn again and again in this world. But I am not altogether devoid of desire. I have one demand. I must be born each time in the company of your pure devotees. Even devotional service mixed with knowledge or material success will not satisfy me. 58. The next of the seven verses says, the source for the manifestation and annihilation of the cosmos, and the cause by which these are perceived, is the supreme fountainhead, the absolute truth known as Brahman and Paramatma. The word visible manifestation, abhasa, means the sending forth of material creation, and annihilation, nirodha, means the winding up. The entity from whom these processes arise and by whom they are made perceivable to the jiva's senses is the ashraya, well known as Brahman and Paramatma. Here the word thus iti carries the sense of features, and this implies the idea of the personality of God in Bhagavan also. This we intend to fully explain later. The entire six sandarbhas are dedicated to explaining the Bhagavatam's 10th and principal theme, the Ashraya. Here, Sri Jiva Goswami only hints at the identity of the Ashraya. To define the supreme truth in relation to the material world as the source of its creation, maintenance, and destruction says a little about the full extent of the Lord's glories, especially the opulence and attractiveness of his personality. Nonetheless, our limited modes of thinking in material life dispose us to appreciate more readily the impersonal aspect of the Supreme. Vyasadeva in his Vedanta Sutras 112 first defines Brahman in this way: Janmadhyasya yataha, that from which come the creation and other transformations of this world. As impostors become more adept at meditating on the Supreme, they may gradually realize Him as the Paramatma localized in their own hearts. In this intermediate realization, the Supreme appears with some of His personal features, but does not display the active exchanges of Prema Bhakti. Because the meditators on Paramatma have only a neutral relationship with Him, they do not take part in loving service, friendship, and more intimate relationships. Only the most advanced mystics progress to this full realization of Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. In the Lord's own words, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Gyanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabhaha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. 59. And to give within the process of maintenance a clear indication of the identity of the shelter, ashraya, the divisions of adhyatma and so on are described in the final two of the 7 verses. This is done through a meditation on manifestly visible phenomena involving again the individual living beings. Just a minute. This Adhyatmika Purusha is the same Jiva as the Adhidaivika Purusha. And the source of the distinction between these two is called the Adhibhautika Purusha. In the absence of any one of these, we do not perceive the other two. He who knows all three is the Supreme Soul. Independent of all else, he is his own support and the true Ashraya. This Adhyatmika person, the Jiva, who identifies himself as the owner of, for example, the visual sense, also assumes the role of the Adhidaivika person, in this example, the demigod of the sun and the other presiding deities of sight. Before the creation of the material body, the senses are unable to function, having no place to reside. And so, the different functions of the two Purushas, one presuming to activate the senses with consciousness, and the other making this activation possible, have not yet appeared. See, if the Jivatma is not in the gross body, then the senses do not become activated. When the Jivatma is in the body, through consciousness, the senses become activated. And then you also require the presiding deity of those senses, the demigods, who in fact make that activation possible. Thus, the two remain indistinguishably jivas and nothing more. Later, the adhibhautika person appears, by whom the two other persons become divided into separate identities, the claimed proprietor of the sense and the presiding deity of the sense. This adhibhautika person is a visible body represented by the eyeball and other physical sense organs. He is regarded as a person in that he is an upadhi of the jiva, as stated in the Shruti text. This person is made of food and bodily fluids. In the transcendental realm of Vaikuntha, every living thing is always joyful, free from limits and defects. In that realm, moreover, the all powerful, all blissful personality of God is ever present to everyone, sharing various loving exchanges with his devotees. In Vaikuntha, there is no need for the uh, contrived means roundabout arrangements that allow the embodied souls to pursue the exploitation of matter, arrangements that must be constantly maintained by regulating demigods. Material life is extremely complicated, as modern biochemists have discovered. For example, the unconscious and seemingly effortless process of digesting a meal involves hundreds of chemical reactions with hundreds of different enzymes and long chains and cycles of intermediate byproducts. All of this needing to be orchestrated to a fine precision for digestion to succeed. Biologists have identified organic chemicals and minerals and their complex interactions, but have hardly considered who might have designed this elegant intricacy and whether higher intelligences might be at work even now to inspire and direct the automatic life processes that go on in every living body, processes of which the owners of the bodies are only slightly aware. The Vedas and texts derived from them reveal how the higher controllers, the king of heaven, and his colleagues, such as the demigods of the sun, wind, and fire, influence the processes of life. The medical science of the Ayurveda, for instance, points out the essential influence of the demigod of fire in the process of digestion. Without the right Agni Samskara or grace of fire, food cannot properly digest, and this results in disease. The demigods Indra, Surya, Vayu, Agni, and others are the deities worshipped by the hymns of the Rig Veda. The most confidential parts of Vedic literature, however, further reveal these very gods to be creatures of the Supreme God. Like the mortals they dominate, they are finite living beings, although unlike ordinary mortals, they've been specially empowered by their Lord to assume universal controlling functions. As Shukadeva Goswami shows in the verses cited in this Anucheda, the Adhyatmika person, the controlled embodied soul, is the same as the Adhidaivika person, the controlling demigod, in the sense that both are in the same category as individual spirit soul, Jiva. They differ merely in the roles they play as controllers and controlled. The third person in the material triad, group of three, the Adhibhautika, is different from the other two because he, quote unquote, is an inert material body with its organs and senses. Of course, this third person is still needed for material life to function. Without the quote unquote living bodies, the mortals have no means for trying to enjoy, and the deities have nothing to rule. Thus, the different roles of being a demigod and being a mortal are only possible because of the presence in this world of material bodies. By material bodies, we're talking of gross bodies. Sri Shukadev concludes his statement by saying that above these three material persons is the ultimate person, the shelter of all, beyond whom there is no other shelter. The Supreme Person knows fully the three persons of material life, and he is their ultimate controller. Teaching us to know and become attracted to him is the main purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the most perfect distillation of the teachings of the Vedas. All other discussions in Srimad Bhagavatam are meant only to serve this main purpose. I should stop here. It's already very heavy discussion. Tomorrow we'll resume from uh, text number 9 actually. Let me just note it down. 2, 1, 9. And after I read out 9 and after I read out 9, I will also go back to, I'll go through these commentaries and all that. And then we'll go back here. This, up to text 60. That was in there. Something. Yes. Okay. Come here. Okay, I'll try to solve this sound issue here. There's a question here. I heard Canto 1 and 2 are lotus feet of the Lord. Where is this mentioned? It comes in Padma Purana. Padav Yadiyo Prasamadvitiyo. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur quotes this. There's a prayer to Srimad Bhagavatam as a form of Lord Krishna. And Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur has quoted that prayer. So that's where we know. That's how we know. Okay, so we'll stop with that. Ansha Dharmatar Vyashika Pasanjam Here, Patitanam Pavanekshyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha.